Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Pillbox Movies. I'm Hank, and today we're going to be watching the 2001 animated film Millennium Actress. This movie is directed by Japanese animation director Satoshi Kon. Anime, we can call it anime, why not? Satoshi Kon is a well-known Japanese director. I'd say like maybe just a level below Hayao Miyazaki in terms of popularity and notoriety. He's well known for crafting films in the vein of psychological thrillers, as well as dealing with themes of memory, perception, illusion versus reality. I saw Paprika back in 2006, and I didn't really love the story. I could see its influences and things.
If you ever want to see direct influence,
a movie that Inception directly ripped off.
And I have to say, I love Perfect Blue. I think Perfect Blue is about as close to a perfect anime as I've seen, and just wildly prescient in terms of analyzing our own relationship with our public identity. So based on that alone, I'm really excited to see Millennium Actress. If it's a companion piece and it's up to par to any degree with Perfect Blue, then I'm gonna be really excited. Ooh, I like the soundtrack already. I don't usually notice soundtracks for anime movies very strongly, except obviously in the case of Joe Hisashi, the composer for the Miyazaki films. I don't know if you've ever seen. There are some videos rolling around on YouTube of like the shortcuts that Japanese animation has to take in order to meet like production schedules. But there's a really funny one of, I think, Account of Cagliostro, where nobody moves in any of the animation for like a good 10 seconds. And to a certain degree, maybe as an animation purist, I would like everything to be moving. I do concede to Japanese animation making as much, and every animation tradition has these techniques, but Japanese animation kind of blocking out the background to make it as beautiful as possible and not necessarily focusing on it being dynamic. There are actually some animation styles that try and animate everything, and in like concept I like the idea, but in execution, like with French animation, I just find it too animated and too busy. We'll say too busy.
私どもも公平の至りであります。年仕様にも送り先もわからず、こうして
Until I could find you and give you this letter. You don't know me, but you killed my daddy.
大事なものだったのでは。
一番大切なものを開ける。
My heart.
こちらがその専務さん。でもうちの母は女優なんていかがわしい。
And I like the blown out backlit. Like, that's not necessarily something that people always think about when, creating animation, but having the blown out windows in the back, that's very kind of Roger Deakins-esque cinematography. So her life began with an earthquake. It's probably going to end with an earthquake. Oh, her looking like the doll in Paprika. I like how fluid this is, actually. But it's a really interesting look to try and differentiate between time periods, and it kind of conjures up the old documentary feel. Or like you're seeing an exhibit in a museum. And once again, it's a good saver on animation costs. Ideally, you'd want to have like the background and the foreground be as interactive as possible, but like I said before, that comes at an expense. If you think about the triangle of like production, things being fast, cheap, or good, one element is sacrificed in kind of trying to preserve the other two. And that's why directors like Satoshi Kon or Hayao Miyazaki are so valuable. It's a matter of prioritization. Based on those constraints, they prioritize. Particularly in the case of Satoshi Kon, you can kind of tell he has a base level knowledge of human anatomy and proportions and representing that in a fluid animated form.
千代子君だってお国の役に立ちたいに決まってる。そうだろう。
そうはおっしゃいますか務まりませんし、この子には婿をもらって店を継いでもらわなければ
Oh,
なりま
she's
せん。
pissed. She does not want this future for herself.
国家と菓子屋とどっちが大事なんだ。
お国のためお国のためというんだ。女は家を守り子供を産むのが本分。
Conservative values. And I actually like the contrast. The contrast is also shown in their costuming. It's actually really kind of layered and deep. The mother is wearing a traditional kimono, and the producer has on the Western-influenced three-piece suit. Lots of interesting dynamics at play. I really like this. I actually really like the tint they're giving on the skin. This like kind of looks kind of like flat and like old and saggy, you know, the grayish color that the people's skin are in. But I actually think that look, you can actually distinguish time period based off the skin type. The skin of the director and his cinematographer or his AD is a different tone to reflect the present. And having this flat gray tone of the skin of her past kind of evokes colors more strongly, like the red in the red of her scarf and gloves and hat.
娘、男が来なかったか。大きな風呂敷を抱えたやつだ。
And once again, by not having an interactive background, you can have really evocative. You can make decisions in other directions, like having this really evocative sunset happening and these really soft vibrant colors. Oh, is he a painter? Oh, this is so sweet. Yep, and the red of her scarf is brought out more vibrantly because everything is the color scheme everywhere else is flattened out. Teenage rebellion. You gotta have it. If your mom won't let you go do movies, then you'll end up taking in a stranger and nursing him in your household.
その中にイーゼルを立てて痛いほどの寒さを感じてこの絵を完成させたいんだ。
Ooh.
大きくて真っ白な風景の中にいると
This is the kind of boy you get into at this age. He's got that sad artistic energy. And I like how you can't see his eyes throughout this. That's kind of scary, actually. Because he's a memory, I'm like wondering how his eyes will be revealed. What's that?
一番大切なもの？
See your paintbrush and easel.
でもまだ
I don't know. The lock on that paint set seemed a lot smaller than the key. This is kind of self-evident in animation films. You kind of like understand it implicitly without like realizing it literally. But an aspect of character design or production design that you don't really think of when you think of animated films is like creating faces that are easily identifiable and easily distinguishable. You don't really think about it too much until you have to do it, but like creating 10 or 15 or 20 or 25 faces that are all different, that all are immediately recognizable and hopefully can tell you about a character's personality in like a snap is really hard to do. Animation usually chooses to, and cartoons usually choose to do it based on face shape and silhouette. But if you think about the faces, and I always use Toy Story as an example because it's like the most easily, it's the most well-known animated film to a certain degree. But everybody immediately has recognizable features, despite all living in the same integrated world. If you want to think of Woody's face, you immediately think of the face shape of a cylinder or of like a long rectangle, and he's got really sharp features with like the triangular nose, and he's got squares that are like evened out by some smooth lines, like the smoothness of his hair or the smoothness of his eyes, but and his rounded cheeks, but it's all kind of like really pointy pointy into smooth in comparison to like Buzz Lightyear, who kind of has like he has an eggplant emoji. He has an eggplant shaped face where it's a really small head that rounds out to a really huge mouth, and that kind of gives you an idea of his character. He doesn't have much brains, but he talks a lot. And contrast that to like Bo, who's the Bo Peep. Bo Peep has like kind of traditional feminine features. She's really soft, and she has a really small face, and it's porcelain, obviously. But also, Jessie has a rounded face. But in contrast to Bo, Jessie actually has a really huge head, and it's very wide. It's very open in a way that Bo Peep is actually pretty closed, because she's not a central character. She's meant to be kind of diminutive and fade into the background in comparison to like Woody or Buzz or Jessie. And these are just talking about the human anatomy-based toys. The face shapes of like the animal toys are even more pronounced and differentiated, but you have to kind of create this visual language where each of these characters are like identifiable, and you can see aspects of their personality within their design. And that's in like the kind of like crazy kind of exaggerated world of Toy Story. It gets even harder if you're trying to do something that's like grounded and preserving human anatomy, as is in the case of Satoshi Kon films. And so it's really interesting to see the way Satoshi Kon creates characters that are easily defined against each other. And it also creates issues that it's like where the line is kind of muddled between whether or not it's a bug or it's a feature, because he plays more towards realism in his animation style. It creates an uncanny valley where like his secondary characters like Misafan, whatever his name is in Perfect Blue, the stalker, has really grotesque and like exaggerated features. And you kind of see that in a lot of the secondary characters, that kind of like a caricature artist. They're exaggerated just enough to make them almost like ugly or grotesque, because that's what'll make them recognizable or memorable. Whereas comparatively, Fujiwara has to have very simple features because she's a heroine, and she needs like only one or two distinguishing marks, like her beauty mark or the little pin she has in her hair, in order to give her defining features. And by the way, all these elements that I'm discussing and how to like distinguish characters in animated films, they're true in live action films as well, but in different ways, in subtler ways, I guess, whether it be the casting or the makeup or the costuming. Lots of the same decisions are made in order to distinguish characters from each other. And we'll see if this theory plays out, but obviously this isn't actually happening, and the elements of the past won't interact with the present ever. Like, she didn't say anything when the director was talking to her. I'm like wondering now if this is going to be like an atonement kind of narrative, where this is going to be about the narrative that she made up in order to kind of deal with life. Hey, this is Ron! I didn't know this would be going on. This is a big time jump, though. She was making movies in like the 30s or 40s, and Ron was filmed in the 80s. I don't remember this being in Ron. This is a change in narrative. Yo, this shit's creepy. Completely in Sekiro territory. This is
たばかったか。我はそなたが憎い。憎くてたまらぬ。そして愛おしい。愛おしくてたまらぬのじゃ。いずれわかる時が来よう。
I wonder how they animated fire back then. Back then being 2001. And also the tone, the skin tone changed when he entered into the movie. Yeah, I'm wondering if they can't interact with the past unless they adopt like a character within the films.
姫様、一刻も早く国元へ。
Oh god, ridiculous. Oh, Jesus. I do remember this scene, songs of the princess in Ron. As I recall in the movie, these are the bad guys, but whatever. Soundtrack is banging, bro. Bro, get on this soundtrack. I see.
大丈夫ですか、太夫。う
ちなら平気どす。
私に任せておくれやす。
This is interesting in terms of the director's relationship with this actress. There is this kind of fixation to see her as like, in terms of her film roles, as a damsel in constant need of being saved. It plays on the same dynamics of Perfect Blue, except like in Perfect Blue, it's like about. They're both about obsessions with like a media icon, in one a pop star and the other an actress, but manifesting in two different ways. Like Perfect Blue is about obsession, becoming manifesting as stalking and like inculcating yourself into a person's life. They're the same thing. I don't know. Good and bad, they're the same thing. Perfect Blue is about from the stalker angle, and right now in Millennium Actress, the director's playing the savior role, but they both kind of manifest. They're both about the same thing. Like Chiyoko is often the maiden or damsel in distress in her own film narratives, and so he plays the part of the white knight to swoop in and save her, and in doing that he kind of like he bolsters his own ego in interacting with his pop culture artifact in this way and being the savior for his conceptualization for Chiyoko. I don't know if this will necessarily take it in that direction, because that'd be really dark to say that, you know, the line between the fan and the fanatic is just a difference in point of view. This soundtrack would absolutely bang in modern day. I love this change in animation style. I really wouldn't have expected this from a 2001 animation. It's like, it's really diverse and imaginative, and kind of like revealing of like the style Satoshi Kon would adopt for Paprika. because I definitely think of him more in the context of Perfect Blue and wanting to like maintain verisimilitude or reality for as much as possible, but you can kind of see him breaking from that tradition now and like wanting to create something that's more emblematic of the interior world as opposed to the exterior. And he's got the red scarf, like when they first met, she was wearing the red scarf. And they're playing out the same sequence of her running after him on the train tracks. That's interesting. There's interesting parallels happening that make me wonder how many of these are actually kind of like the same scenario played out in fantastical form and fictional form. I'm getting like big atonement vibes from this. This is Godzilla. What is this? That's what I want to know. I'm beginning to get a sense of like an issue I had with Paprika 2 in terms of pacing, because Satoshi Kon has so many like really excellent, cool ideas he wants to explore. It's kind of hard for, in my opinion, for him to keep a leash on like narrative tension. Like with Paprika, it'd be like, you know, a mystery is established in a scene. We have to try and solve the mystery, and then we fall into a rabbit hole and go into another mystery. And it's like cool, and it's like it's a fine way to kind of recycle the same narrative format over and over again. You just like go deeper into the rabbit hole, and this is an issue with Inception too. But right now, this is kind of like a narrative issue I have with Kon, honestly, in Paprika, that I see rearing its head a little bit in Millennium Actress. I'm sure something's going to happen now to kind of change the dynamic and give you a sense of reward or sense of new dynamics. But it's just something I want to bookmark. I want to earmark as a potential issue. He made a painting of her. That's beautiful. I really like the palette swap for this era. This kind of sepia tone. This is something that we this is like the yellows and browns and oranges. This is something we traditionally attribute to an older era, in the sense of like, this is what we were taught in the visual language of like The Godfather Part 2 was what the past looked like. But this is still like visually differentiated from the monochrome, the gray of when she was first coming up as a teenager. Marriage proposals. Oh. So this is interesting, actually. I mean, she's doing it because she's in love with one guy, but it is interesting to see how she's rebelling more and more against her traditional roles as a woman, in thinking that you know, all of a woman's pursuits is in the end serving to like play a wife and play a mother. And it's an interesting dynamic. Ooh, just like, I really really love the color palette to this era. The sepia tone is so cool. The sepia tone is so visually different, and it's something you like really don't see in animation a lot. This color scheme, I think this is just like a great design decision on Kon's part. Yeah, so you don't see his eyes and you don't see his pupils highlight because she doesn't remember what he looks like. Makes sense. And it's like fun to see her in a traditional kimono because she's, over the course of this narrative, has been grappling with playing a traditional role. And so to see her in this late stage of life having to revert back to that, it's like, it's stately, but it's also gives a sense of like sadness around her character that she couldn't like kind of like break out of this cycle. Yeah. Now you see like she has to revert back to this traditional route. Oh, that's him. It's the cop. The copper. The A-cab. He died in prison. Atonement. Oh God. Yo, that sucks. After all these years, why? Why after so long? Oh, that's cool. He's disappearing into his own environment. It's the same sunset that they first met at, but now darker, as though the time has passed too late. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
何もここにある。あなたのおかげね。この鍵はあの人の思い出を分けてくれた。
Imagine going after the same boy for 50 years. I mean, I think I'd try and find somebody else, to be honest. Dark side of dimensions. I will find the Pharaoh again, Yugi. She loves the chase. She a player. Huh. I really like this. I did. I think I came off of this with some of the same feelings as Paprika, but not as bad. I think I liked the narrative to this, but I kind of recognize that, for my taste at least, it isn't as compelling or as dynamic as I would have wanted it to be. And while the ending in a platonic ideal is the kind of ending I would want to this, it isn't like emotionally satisfying in a way that I'd want the movie to be. Sometimes you just want a movie to have a really great ending, and that's like really hard to find with some of Satoshi Kon's movies. And I think that's partially why I like covet Perfect Blue so much. It's intensive and consistent within its own narrative framework, where there's like a complete story that's being told, and also enough loose threads that it can be led to whatever interpretation like your fancies take you. With his other movies, I don't know, they're a bit loose formed, in my opinion, from a narrative perspective, where there's lots of really interesting ideas, but it's really hard to find a through line that like sets them as sharply as I would like. Like, if you wanted to say what's like the perfect analog for this movie, it's obviously Titanic. This movie's narrative thrust is the same as Titanic, with like a director and a crew like going to go interview an old lady with a secret based around like a true lost love. But with Titanic, you had Rose and Jack, like, and their sweeping romance. That's like kind of like emotionally an important aspect to these narratives. Like the same with English Patient. I know it's not the kind of movie that Millennium Actress is seeking to be, but from an optimization point of like satisfying your audience, like it's a really good element to have the young lovers' love depicted. Hanging your hat on just the one character pining after another and chasing after another, it could strain your audience's emotional capacity after a while. And I say that strictly from my point of view. Others may disagree, but I think it's a little bit of a loose concept to hang an entire movie off of. But I have to say, from like a design standpoint, from like character and art design standpoint, this movie is like really, really, really good. Oh my god, the like decisions to be made in recreating and depicting the different time periods, the different worlds, the different filmic languages. It's so dense. There are so many cool choices that were being made to distinguish each era from another, and I really loved the color palette swaps that happened in showing the different eras. And when all those colors kind of just like exploded before she found the portrait on the stone wall, all that stuff was just really great. So yeah, this was Millennium Actress. Definitely check it out. Definitely check out Satoshi Kon's other works, Paprika, Tokyo Godfathers. Definitely check out Perfect Blue. It's like maybe my favorite animated film ever. You know, barring Spirited Away or something. So yeah, if you like this, please give it a like, and if you haven't, subscribe. I'm Hank. I'm gonna go sleep forever. Keep watching good movies. Who is she? I don't know her.